an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo, chapters 23, 24, 25, and 26. Those are Wylan, Jesper, Matthias, and Kaz. In these chapters, everybody is shook to their cores. None more so than Wylan, who is particularly aware of how much these people have been through and what it would have to take to mess them up in their heads. Also, there is a tense as fuck scene between Kaz and Denise, and I'm in this weird place with them where I don't exactly ship them, but I just want them both to get over their trauma so badly, or at least move past it, that I'm still sort of rooting for the two of them together because I feel like they'd be really good for one another in that sense, which I'm not sure is like a healthy, good thing to wish upon them. Yet here I am. What can I say? I just want everybody to be okay. Is that so much to ask? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So, first of all, of course, I want to thank Denise for commissioning this episode. This is moving along a lot faster all of a sudden. I just got a bunch of Crooked Kingdom commissions at the same time. So I am really enjoying that. Jamie, who was very worried at first when I said that I was going to be introducing this 2-month limit rule, which I may have to alter considering how booked up I've been. She has been concerned that I was going to go over the 2-month mark with Crooked Kingdom. And I was like, girl, don't you worry about that because I've been getting a lot of those. So this time around, we are in Wylan's head to begin with. And he is like I said, shook. This poor kid knows how tough these people are. And if they are all basically trembling and quiet, and their sort of usual bravado they're not even trying to pretend anymore. It's one thing when somebody is putting on, and even though you know they're putting on, and they know you know that they're putting on, they're at least trying to make the effort. That feels like there's still some danger that isn't inevitable because they're being hopeful about it. But when you get to this point where everybody is just so broken down that they're not even bothering to pretend because their energy is gone and they can't waste it by playing games, that's some other shit. And Wylan is very, very aware of that. And they have to really keep their heads down and go through all of these back alleys and weird abandoned apartments and buildings and stuff in order to get through the city without being seen. And it just is really a testament to Kaz that he knows as much as he does about how to get around, that he can do it considering everybody is fucking looking at them or looking for them. And he, of course, Wylan, is really, really concerned about what's happened with Jesper, because Jesper and Matthias, reminder, are with Kuwait on the island, and as of yet, nobody knows whether or not they're okay. So, and I really like this line. I highlighted this one. Jesper had to survive. They all did. Wylan remembered the first time he'd seen the sharpshooter. He'd seemed like a creature from another world, dressed in lime green and lemon yellow, his stride long and loping, as if every step was poured from a bottle with a narrow neck. Is that the most beautiful thing you ever read? As if every step was poured from a bottle with a narrow neck. That is some good shit right there. It's the kind of thing that almost doesn't work, and then it does in part because it doesn't. Like, it's so expressive that if you think about it too hard, it doesn't work because it's meant to be so abstract. And I really like things like that just, you have to let it be what it is and just give you an impression rather than trying to really parse it. And that's when it's beautiful. So Weiland, we go back in time a little bit and see how things went for him immediately after the attempt on his life when his father sent those men to strangle him. And even after everything that had gone down, he really refused to believe that his father had meant for this to happen. He keeps telling himself that these men might have acted on their own, that there might have been some other reason. And he only just has enough money to get a room in a really shitty boarding house that's Weiland, remember, comes from a wealthy family of great luxury in which he can get whatever he needs at any time. And he has to go to this place that he can barely afford. And he's almost he's almost broke enough that he's trying not to eat so that he can at least pay for the room and be somewhere safe. But eventually he winds up being driven out of his room and down to get something to eat. And it comes upon him that he's going to have to get a job because he's not planning on trying to go home. He finally opens the papers that his father gave him and sees that they are totally blank and realizes, yep, he did do that shit on purpose. And even still, at this point in time, he is unwilling to look at what his father really is. It's just so, maybe Migson and Pryor had misunderstood his father's orders. It had just been a terrible mistake. But when he opens this and realizes that there's not actually any writing on it at all, he realizes how much sort of contempt was in this whole plan, because his father knew Weiland would never even open it to look at the papers because he is that confident that his kid is incompetent at reading that he would never even bother, and that his kid is so gullible and trusting that he wouldn't feel any suspicion at all and even think to check for any reason. So yeah, Weiland is out here terrified by himself. And that's really I forget sometimes how young he is supposed to be. What is he, 16 at this point, maybe? Maybe a little bit older. But let's set aside just the fact that he comes from money, even if he didn't, but he came from a family that took care of him. Think of yourself being suddenly dropped somewhere with whatever money you just had in your pocket and you just have to get by. How utterly terrifying that would be. And you have to push through it. You have to do it. And this is what happens with a lot of runaways and stuff, especially kids who have been disowned by their parents for one reason or another, because they're gay or trans or because they, don't want to follow this religious or they are getting into drugs or they, there's any number of things sometimes because a girl gets pregnant. And this is what leads a lot of young people to turning to sex work in order to make ends meet. And that makes them targets for predators who are looking to basically take control of that situation and pimp them out so that they can profit off of it. And Weiland just refuses to do that. So he is able to get work at this tannery. And this is the kind of thing that I really like to point to, because sex work is just one of those things that people have such baggage around sex that they see it as a really, and it is obviously, of course, going to be a dangerous occupation. It wouldn't be so dangerous if it were legal, but whatever. But what he winds up doing instead is working with his body completely exposed to dangerous chemicals that will kill him slowly. Which, is that better? You know, like, it doesn't involve sex. Okay, sure. But you're poisoning yourself. Like, it's just, you know, and it's the sort of thing too, like, are you even making as good of money as you would be if you were doing sex work? Like, there's just a lot of judgment that comes with sex work as whether it's valid or not. And it really, any type of work that you do, you are selling yourself in some way. And whether or not you agree with the idea of having sex with people that you have no relationship with, that isn't really the relevant thing. The relevant thing is that you are selling your body, even if you are just doing physical labor for somebody, even if you are just doing data entry. You are selling yourself and your time. And if you have a problem with sex work, that's just because you have baggage around sex specifically. And that's really your problem, not theirs. So he starts working at this place, and he starts to, because he has a lot of like scientific knowledge from his training at home, he is able to point out some things that the person in charge is doing wrong for tanning all of these hides and coloring and dyeing them and everything. And suggests that they start adding seawater to things so that they don't evaporate as quickly. But he is also aware that it will cause buildup and rust, and they'll have to, like, you know, clean things out more frequently. And when it turns out that he's right, this guy comes to rely on him more and more. And Weiland is starting to realize that maybe he should start asking for some more money, because he's proving to be very valuable to this guy. And just as he's really sort of thinking about that, he gets approached by Jesper for the first time. And it's a really sweet moment of this, like, you know, first encounter with Jesper, whom we know so well by now, but Jesper did not know then, and looking at him through these new eyes. And I really love the way this is, like, because he shows up, as was previously said, in this lime green and yellow outfit. He seemed to exude pleasure, as if there was no place he'd rather be than a miserable, foul-smelling tannery, as if he'd just walked into a party he couldn't wait to attend. Though he was skinny, his body fit together with a kind of loose-limbed ease. The dye chief didn't usually like strangers on the dyeing floor, but he didn't say a word to this boy, with the revolver slung across his hips, just tipped his hat respectfully and went scurrying off. Weiland's first thought was that this boy had the most perfectly shaped lips he'd ever seen. His second was that his father had sent someone new to kill him. That hadn't even occurred to me, that Weiland would have thought that when he first met Jesper, but of course he would. This kid's walking in with exposed weapons, and his dad tried to hurt him once already. Like, of course, you know, but it just didn't even enter my head that maybe the first time he met Jesper, it wasn't awesome for him. And I think this is at this point when he starts to get notes from his dad, but he can't read any of them. And he's starting to get a little bit panicky about the fact that his dad knows where he is. So Jesper tells him to come and meet Kaz, whom he doesn't know yet. And it's Kaz and Inej that need flash bombs and something maybe a little bit more intense. And he says no. But when he goes home, that's the first time that there's a note for him. And he gets so flipped out that he's like, fine, you know what? I'm going to do this thing. And so he does. He goes and works for them. But he makes so much more money doing just this one job that it's hard for him to, like, go back to this tannery where he's slowly being, like, eaten from the inside by chemicals, when he could do something like this and maybe be safe from his father and away from there. The letters continued to arrive. Weiland didn't know what to make of them. Were they threats? Taunts? He stashed them in a stack beneath his mattress, and sometimes at night he thought he could feel the ink bleeding through the pages, up through the mattress, and into his heart, like dark poison. That is a good line, you guys. There is shit like that in our lives, though. Am I wrong? Like, there are certain things that sort of feel like they give off evil, for the lack of a better way to say it, that sort of leaks out of them even when they're not. It's just weird how things can have that sort of power over you. But as he continues to work for Kaz, he is starting to realize that he can save up enough money to get out of here and hide forever. And his father can try and try, but if he's out of his reach, then that's done. And then he thinks he was getting so skinny, he had to cut new holes in his belt. But he would sell himself in the pleasure houses of West Stave before he'd ask for his father's mercy. Wylan hadn't realized it then, but Kaz had known his true identity all along. Dirty Hands kept tabs on anyone who took up residence in the barrel, and he'd placed Wylan under Dreg's protection, certain that one day a rich mercher's son would come in handy. He had no illusions about why Kaz had looked out for him, but he also knew he would never have survived this long without his help. And Kaz didn't care if he could read. Kaz and the others teased him, but they'd given him a chance to prove himself. They valued the things he could do, instead of punishing him for the things he couldn't. Wylan had believed that Kaz could get revenge for what had been done to his mother. He'd believed that despite his father's wealth and influence, this crew, his crew, was a match for Jan Van Eyck. But now his father was reaching out to taunt him yet again. So, yeah, that's a bummer, And it's not really like Wylan has all these choices. So even though he's coming to this point where he's starting to be like, maybe I just can't beat my dad, he also isn't thinking about abandoning this crew. And they finally wind up in this hotel that is just way too nice. I was so confused about this, and I couldn't understand until later when we find out what's been going on is that Kaz has been paying for Colm to stay here in order to set up an illusion that Colm is a Jorda farmer. Kaz knew that there was some other angle that he had to prepare for, and decided to take advantage because he knew that Jan Van Eyck is buying up all of the Jorda farms, that positioning somebody that Jan wants to get a hold of, wants to get an advantage over, would probably just be a smart move, even if he didn't exactly know what he would do with that yet. Which is just that kind of foresight, that far thinking. I really like that Kaz... It's not even like he has a backup plan. There's no plan, because he never saw things going this wrong. He knew that it was risky, but he had no idea that Pekka Rollins was going to throw in entirely with Jan Van Eyck and that they'd all be caught out the way that they were. But it's just that sort of, why not? I may as well cover my ass with something that I could build a plan from eventually. And I really love this scene. They all come inside this hotel room where Colm is staying, this beautiful room. And he sees everybody finally come inside. Matthias and Jesper and what's his face, the shoe boy. I always forget his name. They're already there. And everybody is hugging. And, not quite crying, but, it's, almost there. And Wylan really is so deeply in his heart relieved that everybody is okay. And he's thinking about how his father would have looked down on all these people, but how much respect he has for them now. He's just, this is a family that he has found. And they order up room service, tons of coffee and waffles, which, let me tell you, that sounds amazing. I am real jealous. And they are all working on handling Inej's wounds because she is bleeding from several places, and they have to patch her up. And then they start talking about what's going on with this fucking surprise and this... They're in a situation where now almost everybody is looking for them. And they're saying that now. And this isn't even, it's not until the next section that we actually find out how bad it is. But they start talking about Nina's power changing and the fact that she has been able to raise the dead and how crazy this change is and what Perem can do that they didn't even know about. So Kaz asks Colm if there's access to the clock tower on this floor. And he leaves and goes out there and the rest of them follow. And Colm eventually winds up just coming up himself and just being I'm not being left out of this. But initially, they're looking outside and Kaz is saying they're sealing up the entire city. Nobody's getting in or out. And one of them is well, that's going to cause some problems. Van Eck is people are going to riot against him for trying to keep them trapped. And Kaz is he's not going to be the one blamed for this. They're going to try and come after us. And Jesper says, well, they just don't have enough manpower to both shut down the city and comb the place trying to find us. And Kaz is ooh, but they do. Look outside. And because they're in the clock tower, they have a good view of several streets. And they start to realize that all of the gangs have been mobilized to try and find them all. They're all wanted alive at this point, which is the one plus side. But nevertheless, even the crows, they are turning on Kaz as well. And they've been deputized by the Stadwatch, which means that they are not only looking for them, but they are legally defended. They're on the right side of the law right now, which never happens. So it's essentially every single resource that could be turned against them has been. If the Stadwatch had tried to lock down the barrel, the gangs would have turned on them. Now they're on the right side of the law, and Van Eck has 2 armies. He's pinning us in. And this is when they spot the dregs. And Jesper is real mad about this. And this turns into a weird back and forth. First of all, Kuwait tries to be just give me up. And Kaz at this point is that is not going to help. Wylan points out, then we'd have done everything else for nothing, which true. But Jesper's also well, Pekka's got his chance to take Kaz out at this point. So you think he's going to give that up just because Van Eck got you? This is about more than just what it was supposed to be about. By this point, things have totally changed. So Kaz says, I can get the Stadwatch to stand down. They don't know about Kuwait. They think they're looking for Wylan. So I'll tell them Wylan's dead. I'll tell them I killed him. And everybody's dude, they'll hang you for that. And he says, well, first I have to go to trial. And Matthias is yeah, you're not going to go to trial. If you come out and say this, Van Eck's just going to have you killed. There's all of these things that Kaz is just sort of throwing out there to see what sticks, but people are not really on board for him sacrificing himself this way because they don't feel there's anything really behind it that makes it seem like it's worth the risk. So Kaz finally snaps on Jesper here because they're, again, going back and forth. Kaz is this is my city. I'm not leaving it with my tail between my legs. Jesper's oh, really? Your city? There's nothing fucking left of it. And what are you always telling me? Walk away from a losing hand. And Kaz says, I'm giving you a way out. Take it. Why are you treating us like a bunch of yellow-bellied skivs? Kaz turned on him. You're the one getting ready to bolt, Jesper. You just want me to run with you so you don't have to feel so bad about it. For all your love of a fight, you're always the first to talk about running for cover. Because I want to stay alive. For what? Kaz said, his eyes glittering. So you can play another hand at the tables? So you can find another way to disappoint your father and let down your friends? Have you told your father you're the reason he's going to lose his farm? Have you told Inej you're the reason she almost died at the end of Uman's knife? That we all almost died? Jesper's shoulders hunched, but he didn't back down. I made a mistake. I let my bad get the best of my good. But for Saint's sake, Kaz, how long are you going to make me pay for that little forgiveness? What do you think my forgiveness looks like, Geordie? Who the hell is Geordie? For the briefest moment, Kaz's face went slack, a confused, almost frightened look in his dark eyes. There and gone, so fast, Wylan wondered if he'd imagined it. And this really makes Kaz sort of snap. And he continues on with, like, yelling at Jesper, who's like, I feel like I just can't win. I'm trying. And he's like, yeah, you can't win. You're a loser. That is why you can't win. He's, like, really rough on Jesper. It's brutal, honestly. And then they start to fucking literally brawl until Colm Fahey comes up and tells them, or he says, Jesper Llewellyn Fahey, that is enough. And, no matter how old you get, when your parents, like, yell at you, a lot of times you just, like, can't help but at least pause. And they sort of stop and pull away from one another. And Colm leaves at this point, allegedly, but I don't believe he's actually gone. But this is when Kaz is like, all right, you know what? I figured it out. Kuwei wants to sacrifice himself, right? What if we actually just let him? And we find out later that what he's planning is a auction, because so many people are after Kuwei. And the only reason that the Merchers Council didn't help out when this whole thing started to come to a head was because, well, I'll get to that. But basically, he's planning to set everyone against one another and use Jesper's dad as a front. And it's a pretty smart idea, but I really have no idea what his plan is for after this is complete. That's the main question. So we go to Jesper, and he has finally his moment of apology with Inej. She is very forgiving in the way that she is, where she is like, I don't personally hold against you your flaw. I know we all have them. But the thing is that you are apologizing for a mistake that is actually part of a pattern that you don't seem to see. And you can't really apologize for a thing if you're going to go and do it again, if you don't really understand why you made that mistake to begin with, which I love so much. Like, this is such a true thing. This is something that I've always, like, I am somebody who, as much as I love the ideas of revenge and quote, justice, eye for an eye stuff, I, more than anything, want people who have done harm to understand the harm they've done. And that requires a kind of empathy from those people that they lack to the point that it causes them to harm the way they do. So I almost never get my wish on that front, because usually the people who need to see what they are like and face that are the very people who are incapable of doing that without huge changes to who they are as a person. And I love that she can see Jesper is not allowing himself the time or introspection to figure out where his mistakes are coming from. So when it comes to him, it's not that he is incapable. She can see that he could be, but he doesn't, it has not even entered his mind to think about that, because he's sort of treating the fact that he has this gambling addiction. And granted, addiction, there is a genetic component to that, so I don't think this is wrong, but he treats it more like it's a disease outside of himself that he hasn't got control over, and he doesn't know why he's afflicted with it. And her interpretation is more, you're using it to make yourself stop feeling something. And you need to look at what that is. Because this is not medicine, even though it feels like it. It's poison. I need you to not apologize. I need you to make amends and promise that you will not repeat the same mistake. It would be better if you had meant to betray us. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, if you at least knew what you were doing, I could feel like you knew and you wouldn't do it again. But if you just made a mistake and you don't really know why you were that stupid, there's nothing to prevent you doing it again because you're not aware of why you're making the choices you are. So she starts to say, you have to find some other way to heal that part of yourself. She laid her hand on his chest. Stop treating your pain like it's something you imagined. If you see the wound is real, then you can heal it. A wound? He opened his mouth to deny it, but something stopped him. For all his trouble at the tables and away from them, Jesper had always thought of himself as lucky, happy, easygoing, the kind of guy people wanted to be around. But what if he'd been bluffing this whole time? Angry and frightened. That's what the Fjerdan had called him. What had Matthias and Inej seen in Jesper that he didn't understand? So he promises to try and think about it, and he goes back to his room with his dad, and he's just a little on edge after what Inej has said, because it's starting to poke some holes in his veneer. And he says he wanted to go down the barrel as fast as his legs could carry him and throw himself down in the first gambling parlor he could find. If he hadn't thought he'd be arrested or shot before he got halfway there, he just might have. He sat. Inej had left the unused vials of the chemical weevil on the table. He picked one up, fiddling with the stopper. And he finally has to confess to his father about what actually happened, how he actually lost the money, what he has actually been doing with his time, that he is not a student, that he has been in debt, that he lost the money gambling, that everything has been a lie. And his father asks, why didn't you just stop? And he wanted to laugh. And he says, it's not like that, not for me. I don't know why. I knew the farm wasn't for you. I wanted you to have something better. Then why not send me to Ravka? Jesper said before he could think better of it. Coffee sloshed from Colm's cup. Out of the question. Why? Why should I send my son to some foreign country to fight and die in their wars? And then all of a sudden, Jesper has this memory of the guy that had been carrying messages between his mother and other people in order to get his mom's help. He shows up at the door with a young girl and wants to take Jesper as well. And his father lies to this guy that Jesper does not have any gifts, that he is not a fabricator, that there is nothing. And Jesper, when his father tells this guy that, first of all, he's not gifted, and second of all, if you ever come back here, I will shoot you in the face. Jesper asks, am I Grisha? And he says, don't say those words in this house. Not ever. That's what killed your mother. Do you understand? That's what took her from us. I won't let you take it too. Do you want to go with them? You can go if that's what you want. I won't be mad. So this is really rough, guys, because it's honestly this is the sort of thing I've been going through personally recently in therapy over the past year, is realizing that, and this next part is the part that really sort of killed my heart. Jesper felt like he couldn't breathe. He couldn't be here anymore. His heart hurt. His head hurt. Guilt and love and resentment were all tangled up inside him, and every time he tried to unravel the knot in his gut, it just got worse. He was ashamed of the mess he'd made, of the trouble he'd brought to his father's door, but he was mad, too. And how could he be angry at his father, the person who loved him most in the world, who had worked to give him everything he had, the person he'd take a bullet for any day of the week? This is the thing. All of us have issues with our parents. There's not a soul on this planet that doesn't have issues with their parents. It's just That's an impossible thing to have happen. I'm sorry. Even if you don't think you do, you do. You're just in denial. It's just impossible to avoid. But everybody's issues are different and end in different ways. And for me, I'm very lucky in that while I have issues with my parents, I still loved them and cared about them and still had a relationship with them. I say had because of my father passing away, but my mother's still around. But when you start to look at the issues you have, because you love them, you pretend they aren't a big deal because we as human beings have a really hard time holding the two facts side by side in our head that we can love someone and care about them and respect them and also kind of hate them. And it's not really hate, but it can feel that way at times, especially if you push it down and it just flares up out of nowhere. It will feel so outside of your control and so sudden and foreign that it feels like hate. And when you do love your parents, that reaction can scare you because it clashes with what you know to also be true about how much you love them and how much they have done for you a lot of the time. And sacrificed for you, and you know that they love you, and that what they have done that has hurt you did not necessarily come from a place of cruelty on their part, that sometimes they hurt you because, like Jesper's father, they were worried and wanted you to be okay, and they did the only thing they knew in the moment that would help, and that wound up being the thing that scarred you forever. So this moment of Jesper finally facing down with his dad, and it's not even really a full conversation. It's not that satisfying, but it's Jesper finally acknowledging this feeling that he has never really looked at. I mean, these moments are big when they happen, when you finally really are able to step back from your own denial and be like, oh my God, because things will start to fall into place. Once you pick out the very start of the pattern, the thread, when you follow it, you're like, oh, Jesus God, that pattern is right there. Everybody else can see it. How did I not see it right there? But it's just, when you're in it, you can't. That's the way it works. That's why therapy is there. Because people from the outside are better at spotting the thing that you're in the middle of. It's not your fault. You know, you can't see your front door when you're sitting inside your house. That doesn't mean the front door isn't there. And somebody coming from the outside will knock on it and know it's there and be like, open this door. Meanwhile, you're in there going, door? What do you mean? Huh? That's how you start, is opening that door that you didn't know was there. So his dad says to him, I didn't raise you to be a criminal. And Jesper's like, listen, I love you so much, Dad. I really do. But yeah, you did. You taught me to lie. I had a gift and you should have let me use it. And Colm says it's not a gift, it's a curse. And it would have killed you the same way it killed your mother. And Jesper gets up and starts to leave, and he says, I'm dying anyway, Dad. I'm just doing it slow. That is a hell of a line. Like, honestly, this is the thing. It's as similar as, like, Wylan deciding that, oh, I'm not going to do this one dangerous job that's looked down upon. I'm going to do this other dangerous job because it's respectable work. But, it's also super dangerous and going to kill you. Okay, cool. That whole moment was so well done. Her psychology on these characters is really, really good. And he's still, as he's leaving, thinking about trying to go and fucking gamble. He still just can't quite get past that. And the only thing that stops him is seeing Wylan in this room playing the piano. And he's not playing, he's just plunking on one key, which should have been a bit of a warning, I think. Because I bet Wylan could play a little bit more than this. But Jesper, like I said, he sees Wylan. He's a little freaked, and he's not really paying attention the way he should. And he asks Wylan, do you want to get out of here? And Wylan looks at him and nods. And Jesper's like, wait, really? And again, he really should have been worried about this because of the fact that Wylan isn't talking this whole time. And finally, Jesper kisses him. And he's thinking about the first time that he ever saw Wylan and his immediate attraction. And then how that grew into a whole other thing as he got to know him better and really care about him. And that feeling is not there as he's kissing him. And he's like, what is the matter with me? And he pulls back and looks at him. And he's like, what the fuck? And then he turns his head and sees Kuwei standing in the doorway, staring. And at first he still doesn't put it together. What? Jesper asked. Do the Shu not kiss before noon? I wouldn't know, Kuwei said sourly. Not Kuwei. Oh, saints, Jesper groaned. That wasn't Kuwei in the doorway. It was Wylan Van Eck, budding demolitions expert and wayward rich kid, and that meant he'd just kissed. Oh, my God. So Wylan just is like, Kaz wants to see us, and leaves because he's still obviously very irritated. And meanwhile, fucking Kuwei is... I thought that he had just done this as a prank, that he was just, like, trying to fuck with him. But Kuwei is basically like, listen, you were very brave. You helped save my life. You're pretty good looking, and we're all going to die. So I'm all right with it. I would totally be down. Meanwhile, Jesper is just like, holy shit, dude, no. What are you doing? And he's leaving, and Kuwei just yells after him, you're a very good kisser. Oh, my God. I love it. That's so funny. I hate it because I am definitely actually shipping Jesper and Wylan, but it's really funny, honestly. So we go to Matthias, and he is sitting with Nina, and she's all curled up against him with her head on his shoulder, and he's thinking about how customarily where he's from, even a husband and wife who are married are not public with their displays of affection this way. And how strange it feels, but at the same time, he loves it. And if she pulled away from him, he'd be really, really bummed. And I love this side of Matthias. He is so, he's so closed off in so many ways, but he is very slowly starting to admit that the way he grew up and the things he was taught sometimes just don't feel right to him, and he wants to do something different. And I think that he has always followed orders to such a degree that the idea that maybe things just aren't right for some people is totally new to him. He really has always functioned according to a set of strict rules that were meant for everyone. And the idea that maybe some rules should apply and some shouldn't to certain people and not to others is just, he would have at one time seen that as an excuse for bad behavior. And now he's starting to realize that, like, maybe we just made stuff up and, like, we're really unreasonable about it. So this is when Kaz shares his whole plan. He says, we're going to sell Kuwei at auction and we're going to fix it so that he goes to Ravka. And the idea here was that they were going to buy him, but, like, Nina pipes up and she's like, Ravka doesn't have any fucking money. I'm not supposed to, like, say that, but by the way. And he's like, oh, listen, I know that they have no money. You know what? Everybody knows. They're trying to act like we don't, but we all know. And he says, the one thing that's, like, sacred to Kirch is trade. And the auction, it would be practically holy. Nobody would interrupt it, and there is no way for anybody to interfere with it. Excuse me. And Inej is going to have to get in touch with the Ravkins to, like, let them in on this plan, because she's the only one that can get through the city, not on the streets where everybody is looking for them. And this is when there's a little side conversation about this, like, weirdo woman, Danyasha, I think it's Danyasha, who fought against Inej. And Matthias recognizes her name and says that she's actually got a claim on the Ravkin throne, but because the reports on her were so, like, they all sounded like she was kind of unbalanced, that they decided if they because what the Driscoll were thinking was that they'd support her claim, since the Driscoll are fighting Ravka. If they supported her claim for the throne, it would make things really unstable in Ravka and be to their advantage. But then they realized that she's like erratic to the point that she would not be predictable enough for them to like manipulate or make an alliance with. So it really wasn't worth the trouble for them. And they think about like how it is that Pekka was able to find their hideout. And at this point, they don't have any idea. It's sort of like, if anybody that worked for him saw any of them heading over that way, it would just be enough. And I wonder if we're going to find out or if it's going to stay as this sort of ambiguous thing. And I'm fine with that because there's a point like where I think Matthias is thinking to himself, maybe it's better that we don't know exactly who it was that they spotted because then that person's going to blame themselves for this whole thing going down. And sometimes you just can't help that the wrong person saw you at the wrong time. So nobody has to carry around that guilt, and maybe that's good. So when Inej says, if the hotel is still uncompromised, I can get to the embassy and back unseen. Good, Kaz said, but the answer didn't come as quickly as Matthias might have expected. He fears for her, Matthias thought, and he does not like it. For once, he could sympathize with the Demjin. I like that moment. Matthias is, for all being like incredibly dense at times, he can be really perceptive. So I love this. You think Fjerda isn't aware that the Ravkin coffers are empty? Nina scowled. You could have at least pretended to be surprised. Ravka's financial woes are no secret. Its treasury was depleted from years of mismanagement by the Lansov kings and fighting on both of its borders. The civil war didn't help, and the new king has borrowed heavily from the Kerch banks. If we go through with the auction, Ravka won't be able to bid competitively. That's why the Kerch Merchant Council is going to bankroll them. And the thing is that they would have to, this is the way they would have to handle it. The council are responsible for running the auction. So it's a conflict of interest if they participate in the auction. However, if they can get their hands on Kuwait via another means, they will do it. Because it says, Kuwait and his father approached the merchant council looking for aid, but they were so afraid of compromising their neutrality, they refused to act. Van Eck saw an opportunity, and he's been operating behind their backs ever since. What has Van Eck been planning all along? He's been buying up Jorda farms so that when the secret of Jorda Perem is unleashed, he'll control the Jorda supply. He wins no matter who has Kuwait. So, think like him. Think like a merch. When Kuwait Ubul announces the auction, the council will know the secret of Perem could become public at any time. They'll finally be free to act, and they'll be looking for opportunities to secure their fortunes and Kerch's position. They can't involve themselves in the auction, but they can guarantee they make a lot of money, whatever the outcome, by buying up the Jorda. We set up a Jorda consortium, a chance for willing investors to make a fine dime off the world going to hell. We bring the council an opportunity and let their greed do the rest. The money never goes to the consortium. We funnel it to Ravka so they can afford to bid on Kuwait. And take a little percentage just like the banks do. So Jesper is like, all right, this all sounds well and good, but who's going to be the shill because they know who all of us are? To which Kaz just sort of is like, well, if only we knew a Jorda farmer who's been holed up in a really expensive suite and is getting some attention for all of his money. And Jesper's dad looks up at Kaz and is like, wait, what, me? And I'm like, Colm, bless your heart. Did you not wonder why Kaz was paying for you to stay in this room? But no, he didn't. He just thought Kaz was being really nice to him. Oh, such a sweetie. He knows Jorda, he speaks Kerch and Zemeni, and he looks the part. You weren't keeping him safe, stashing him in this hotel. You were setting him up. I was building us an out. a hedge of your own? Yes. So Jesper keeps arguing that his father is not going to get involved, that they are going to be able to tell that there is a connection between Jesper and Colm. And Kaz is like, they would have been able to if I had used his real name, but luckily I didn't. And he is being called Johannes Rietveld, a farmer from a town near Liege. His family's been there for years. He has holdings in Kirch and in Novia Zem. But who is he really? That doesn't matter. Think of him as a figment of the Merchant Council's imagination, a wonderful dream come to life to help them scrape some profit from the disaster of Perem. And of course, Colm is like, yeah, fuck it, I'll do it. And Jesper's real mad, but he's like, dude, I came down here to get you to come back. You are my life, and the farm is my life. And the only way that I can get either of those things back is to do this. So yes, I will definitely do it. And they're, they wound up just getting into numbers at this point about how much each of the council will be giving to them towards this auction. Matthias wants a guarantee that Kuwait will be safe, to which Kaz is like, lol, no. This is the best we can come up with. It's certainly not guaranteed. And if you want a guarantee, you can just go fuck off into a storybook, because welcome to the real world, my friend. And he points out they can't touch us till after the auction. And then what? Said Inej. There's going to be one hell of a distraction. So I don't know what that means, what the distraction is going to be. I would imagine it's something explosive with Wylan again, but I feel like they've played that hand. I don't know. If we're going up against the Kirch government and the Fjerdans and the Zemeni, yada, 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 the embassies are full and we don't know how far the rumors of Perem have reached. We're going to need help. I know, said Kaz. That's why I'm going to the Slat. And everybody's looking at him like, are you high? You're super recognizable. Everybody's looking for you. What are you doing? And Kaz is like, I'm sorry, we need a bigger crew for this job, and I'm going to need to do this. I have to fucking find somebody to make a deal with, and I'm sure not going to fucking, what's his face again? Making another deal with Pekka Rollins. So he says, I know the one thing this city is more frightened of than the Shu, the Fjerdans, and the gangs of the Barrow put together. And Nina, you're going to give it to them. And I'm dying to know what he even means by that, because I keep thinking about like ghosts and the dead, but I don't know that that's what he means. So we finally end with chapter 26, which is from Kaz's perspective. And he's thinking over his plan, and he knows that there's a billion ways this shit could go wrong, but it really is the only option available to them at this point. And we find out that the Johannes Rietveld character, unquote, that he created is based on Geordie's middle name and their family last name, which is not a name that anybody here knows is related to Kaz. So there's no way people are going to put it together. And we find out that when he started to make some money, he bought the farm that he grew up on, and he continued to make trades and acquire property under that name, so that he basically had this like sort of fake, like nebulous person that he was creating. And it's probably had been meant for him to eventually like retreat from this life, except that it doesn't feel like he ever really wanted to leave that life. It's like he started to create this thing in memory of his brother in a way. He was like one, and he doesn't even know himself if that's why, but he's really relieved now that he started to do this thing because it's going to come in handy. And he knows about like going into the Slat and just how dangerous it is and how unlikely it is that they are going to be able to get the people together, or that he'll even make it through alive. But again, they don't have a lot of options. So he goes and talks to Inej, who is in the middle of trying to replace her bandages, trying to get her to help him find a way through the slat that he can do when he is, still a cripple, but not going down on the street and walking. It's going to involve a lot of climbing, and he's not thrilled about it, but what can you do? She wants to go with him, and he's just like, you have a whole other thing to do, and I need to go in there alone, you know that. So they do this map, and she helps him, and he decides that he's going to take the long way. And at this point, this moment I really loved. This is so amazing. When he was satisfied he could follow the route from memory, he tucked the map away and took another paper from his pocket. It bore the pale green seal of the Gemmensbank. He handed it to her. "What is this?" she asked, her eyes scanning the page. "It's not..." She ran her fingertips over the words as if expecting them to vanish. "My contract. I don't want you beholden to Per Haskell. Or me." Another half-truth. His mind had concocted 100 schemes to bind her to him, to keep her in the city. But she'd spent enough of her life caged by debts and obligations, and it would be better for both of them when she was gone. "How?" she said. "The money..." "It's done." He'd liquidated every asset he had, used the last of the savings he'd accrued, every ill-gotten cent. "I have no words to thank you for this." Oh, guys, this is good shit. All she's wanted so bad is to buy her way out, and he did it. I love it. So, and he tells her, "I might not make it through this, and if I don't, there's a certain brick that there's money behind, hidden somewhere, and you're going to take it, and you're going to try and get out." And I love this. He asks her to tell him about Dunyasha. And she says, "I think she may be my shadow." And he makes a joke, but she clarifies, "The Suli believe that when we do wrong, we give life to our shadows. Every sin makes the shadow stronger, until eventually the shadow is stronger than you." Which, that is a pretty rad idea that I really like. That's creepy. And also feels a lot more satisfying to me than karma, which is a thing that I find to be an extremely problematic idea. Like, people like to say, well, what goes around comes around, but there's a certain feeling to something bad happening to somebody that makes, like, talking about karma imply maybe you deserve to have that bad thing happen to you. So this idea of, like, you're building shadows with the things that you do, I just really like this. And at this point, she mentions to him, she's like bringing up Geordie. And I love this. Kaz is thinking to himself, if he saw Geordie now, how would he see him? As a mark? Another dumb pigeon looking for a shortcut? He leaned his hands on the edge of the sink. He wasn't angry anymore. He just felt weary. And she's saying, there was no one there to protect you. And he's like, well, there wasn't for you either. And she says, they weren't there, but I had family that loved me and took care of me. You guys were alone. Like, shit happened. And at this point, he's about to leave. And she's like, I need Nina to help me fix this bandage, because she knows he doesn't like to touch. But he looks at her and he's like, you know what? I can do it. And there comes this incredibly tense scene of him replacing her bandages and needing to sort of breathe through the flashbacks that he's having as he does it. And at one point, she sort of cuts into his flashback, speaking to him about how hard this is also for her. Because she says, like, every time guys smile at me or somebody touches me, I feel like I'm going to fall apart. I can't, like, every time I was on the street, I would think I saw former clients everywhere. This is not easy for me either. And that helps him temporarily. And she describes Tante Helene. And it's so gross, guys. She'd hug you close, she'd hold you and pinch you so hard she broke skin. You never knew if a kiss was coming or a slap. One day, you were her best girl. The next day, she'd bring you to her office and tell you she was selling you to a group of men she'd met on the street and make you beg her to keep you. So this helps, and he keeps trying, and he's able to push through, and eventually he's standing in a spot where the curve of her neck is right below his lips. And she tells him, go on. And he kisses her lips, or he kisses her neck, and for a second, he feels like, this is everything I wanted, oh my God. And then the next second, it's like she's a corpse, and he, pulls away from her, flipping out, just completely panicking. And she asks him, what happened to you and your brother? And he can't do it. He doesn't want to talk about it or tell her. And instead of that, he tries to push her away by telling her all of the terrible things that he did after he got back into the barrel. How about I tell you about what I did when I found the woman who pretended to be his wife, the girl who pretended to be his daughter? How about I tell you what happened to the boy who lured us in that first night with his mechanical toy dogs? That's a good one. His name was Philip. I found him running a Mont game on Kelstraat. I tortured him for 2 days and left him bleeding in an alley, the key to a wind-up dog shoved down his throat. The clerks at the bank who turned over our information, the fake attorney, the man who gave me free hot chocolate at Hertzoon's fake office. I destroyed them all, one by one, brick by brick. And Rollins will be the last. There's no peace waiting for me and no forgiveness, not in this life and not in the next. And again, trying to push her away, but that doesn't work on Inej, because she always believes in forgiveness. So, sorry, Kaz, that's not going to happen. And he thinks to himself that she's stronger than he'll ever be, which might be true. And I loved this line. His eyes scanned her face as they always had, closely, hungrily, snatching at the details of her like the thief he was. I love it. So he finally gets dressed, puts his jacket and his gloves back on. And he's like, we are going to do this. And you need to watch for that girl's tell, Dunyasha's tell, because everybody has one. My tell is being a cripple. Your tell is squaring your shoulders like you're about to perform for an audience. And she keeps arguing with him about going out. But he's like, if you ever cared about me at all, do not follow me out there. Inej was wrong about one thing. He knew exactly what he intended to leave behind when he was gone. Damage. And that is the end of that chapter. So, I'm over time. I'm going to wrap this up, but I really like this section. And these plans he's got keep getting crazier and crazier, and I'm really curious what the hell's going to happen about this. So, I guess we'll see. But, yeah. So, once again, many thanks to Denise for commissioning this episode. And thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed. And I will see you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.